in part one of a special two-part episode. As promised, Dom is joining us to break down the Avs, everything, the early season turmoil, us beating the hell out of everyone now. Are we going to win the Stanley Cup? Does Georgie suck? All of those questions and more will be answered. Dan, play that funky music. All right, welcome into a brand new episode of the Blucifer Brothers. I'm Kyle Pullen, joined as always by Ryan Pullen, but we are also joined, not always, by our Avalanche expert. We promised this last week. We know the Avs, we've been neglecting you a bit, so we wanted to bring on the prince of the Avalanche kingdom, our good friend Dom. Dom, thank you for joining us today. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, boys.
Absolutely. So
that was a great hockey response by you. How you doing there, boys? Huh? You're good? Anyways,
doing great work.
Continue, Kyle.
I appreciate the branding. But so Dom, it feels like we watch the Avs. We are admittedly not the biggest like hockey guys, so we don't know the ins and outs of the sport, but we've been spoiled pretty much our whole lives with traditionally pretty awesome hockey to watch. And so we watch it throughout the season. We gamble on it. Those who have listened to the podcast for a while, you heard us lose a bet to the cursed Coyotes. May they burn in Arizona. It's a cursed bet. They, just like they set their ice on fire to slow our team down. Never mind. So we watch these games, but it feels like everyone is kind of disappointed in the Avs on Twitter and that, but we're still really good, and even though we blow games sometimes, we're 8-2 in our last 10 games. Like, we're kind of crushing. They just had a comeback win last night, and put up 7 goals. Like, it does feel like a Stanley Cup team still to me, but it maybe doesn't feel that way from the way Avs fans talk about it. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of it had to do with, beginning of the season, there were a lot of gelling issues. It seemed like nobody was gelling. Nobody could pass the puck right. Nothing was crisp, It feels like it was just a team that didn't have a lot of time together. And that's true in some respects, but I think it just took them forever to kind of gel and get to a point where they're actually playing the hockey that they can play. On top of that, too, not having a captain for 2 years is a downer for any team. So it seems like those things all kind of stack against them. But for whatever reason, in the past, month, 2 months or so, it seems like they've really kind of stuck with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like every time I look at a box score or like, I'm often doing your classic square Denver betting of just like looking at what McKinnon is for a goal and being like, well, that seems like it'll probably definitely happen. And
if he's at home,
yeah, it sort of has been a pretty good bet, honestly. But when I actually look at the box score, it's not the classic names that we're used to seeing, like really scoring these goals or even setting up the chances. Like last night being a perfect example. I was like going through the ESPN highlights because obviously I was watching. I was otherwise encumbered with the Nuggets game that we'll talk about later, but I'm scrolling through and I'm looking at all these highlights of the goals of like, who is this guy? Like, is it really just that those type of guys are taking a little bit longer, or is it just that they like, have we switched up lines? I have no idea what this has sort of looked like to get those guys into a rhythm where it feels like Ross Colton is scoring every other game, it seems like, so
he's the big one. He's one of the, I don't know necessarily that he's like a surprise, like he's been traditionally good. And it took him a while to kind of find that groove again. So Colton in particular is one of those guys that I am super impressed with the past couple weeks, past month, whatever. But it's weird because we have depth, it feels like, but at the same time, it feels like we don't have depth, like consistent depth, I guess. If we can continue the way that we have the past, 6 weeks or so, the depth is really coming into their own for sure, and everyone's kind of coming together better and gelling. So it's keeping that consistent. I mean, if the third, fourth line guys are scoring more, if people like Ross Colton are stepping up and having multi-point games and stuff like that, then I think we're in good shape.
It's sort of
it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that for the first part of the season, for sure.
It is sort of our classic like Nuggets conundrum, right? Of like we have these two, in the Avalanche sense, maybe like 4 to 5, like really sort of star players. Like Nichushkin is a star, Makar's obviously a star. McKinnon's a star. So like you have the star power, but it's like, how are they going to orbit? How are the others going to orbit around them? And it does feel like they're sort of gelling quicker than potentially the Nuggets. Speaking of the Nuggets, how good is Popeye Jones, kid?
He's interesting because I think he's mostly average. Yeah, I mean he's a good defenseman. Like
nice.
He's Sam Girard a couple years ago.
Great.
Like he plays good defense, but there's not much else there.
We're not going to trade him or do anything crazy like that, right? Like we got to keep that synergy together. We got to have the teams in the ball sack all pulling in one direction. It's key. It's key.
It's true. It's true. If you can keep it in the family, it's all good. But yeah, he's decent. I think it speaks to the depth a little bit. It's just like one of those depth players that'll play good defense for you, and that's about it. Not
spot defender. Yeah, we like that.
Yeah,
we love that.
It sounds like so far a theme of the season has been consistency. I know they had players calling out players, saying people just weren't putting in the effort necessary.
Mm-hmm.
That was really surprising to me because I remember reading a kind of in-depth profile on McKinnon when the Avs won, and they were talking about how he was obsessive about diet, about everything, and how he would say stuff to guys like, "Hey, you're looking a little heavy out there. Let's make sure we're getting locked in here, boys." Like it feels like he's kind of this, real intense and like direct leader that wouldn't let his teams have these kind of inconsistent things. You mentioned the captain. Has McKinnon kind of taken on that role, or is it someone else you think with this team that has a bigger voice maybe in the locker room?
It's funny. I had this conversation with some buddies too about whether or not McKinnon would be a good captain. I think he's too intense to be a good captain. I think he would intimidate absolutely everybody, like being the captain. He like, for better or worse, I mean, when Nate is mad, he plays exceptionally well on his own, but I don't know how well that translates to like, in a time of panic, is Nate able to, like calm down a little bit and like bring everybody together and rally?
Just say
or is Nate gonna
he'd make
rage
Kale
out,
cry? You're worried about him making?
He might. Kale seems like a sweet, fragile baby.
He does.
He just seems like the nicest kid in the world.
Yeah,
he does have a perpetual baby face, but he just seems like the nicest guy in the world. And if Nate started yelling at him, that might break poor Kale.
Who would you like if you had to give it to somebody? If you had to put the C on somebody's chest, like who are you slapping it on?
That's the hardest question in the world. I have no idea.
Do you think they can win a cup without like a real answer to that question?
It would be hard because
what do you think? What do you think the difference, I guess, between the cup team? Like, was there a more clear leader on that cup team? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean,
or was it just closer to Rantanen being like, oh, like Was it just, I don't know.
I think a lot of things lined up to help, but I mean, you had guys like Cogliano making gigantic, crazy, awesome speeches that rallied everybody to
Seemed like Kadri
to
was
help
big
them win
on that
playoff
team.
games. Joe, massive.
Like, I'm not even
That's
talking
a
about
really
how good he
good
was on
point.
the
Losing
ice,
him,
just like
losing
his
him
personality.
sucks.
It
Yeah.
felt like he had a lot of pull.
Yeah, there's no doubt. He had a lot of gravity. I mean, people would, when he was playing well, other people would start playing well. When he was, fired up, other people would get fired
I
up.
think
He was another one of those leaders for sure.
I think it's such an interesting conversation, especially with hockey, because I feel like a lot of times people, like in sports, it's so easy to just be like, oh, the best player is obviously like the captain of your team. And in hockey,
Sure.
like there's no sport where that is less true than in hockey. You could put a C on some third line defenseman who like everybody just respects the hell out of, and it would make a ton of sense. But like that doesn't really happen. That would never happen in the NBA, obviously. But like DeAndre Jordan is very important to the Nuggets, and he plays very little. Like there are those sort of guys, and you have to have those type of guys. So that's a really interesting. I'm gonna be on the prowl for our new captain.
Yeah.
It's
Speaking of Nate
a thing to look
McKinnon,
for.
he has been absolutely tearing up the NHL here the past. I mean, he's had a great season throughout, but it feels like the past month it's even kicked up to another level. Two-part question. Do you think he has an actual chance to win MVP this season? It feels like he's getting mentioned in a lot of those conversations now. He's kind of getting the momentum, maybe peaking at the right time, and is involved in a close race for first with Winnipeg, so has a chance to have some, impactful goals that maybe are a little bit more memorable. But with him playing that way, and there's this quote from the Leafs coach that I wanted to read to you. That was when McKinnon's line gets out there with Makar and Toews, the caliber of play, that's not the NHL. That's another league. So
Taves.
That's a great quote.
Come on.
Taves.
Taves, come on. Yeah.
My bad. Mr. Taves, I apologize. But
Mr. Braun does not accept your apology.
I didn't apologize to him. But so with this top-heavy line that it feels like there's a lot of pressure on them in the playoffs when some of these third-line goals tend to dry up, right? Teams are just tighter. Teams are playing their stars longer. You just can't sneak goals like you can in the regular season, where someone's on a back-to-back and they're just like, well, we're going to run our lines out there and it is what it is. Do you trust these other lines behind them to go to that Stanley Cup level?
It's kind of like we talked about. It feels now like we have depth. They've been playing a lot more consistent. They've been scoring bigger goals more often. So the top line has been playing ridiculous. It's funny that quote is two defensemen and Nate. That he's like, oh, this is horrifying, and we're not even talking about like Rantanen and Val and like all the other offensive players that are on the ice at the same time too. So, but I think the depth is there. If they stay consistent with the level that they've been playing at, I mean, even when you talk about like changing up the lines and stuff like that too, Bednar's spectacular at identifying issues and switching up people and putting them in places where they can do some good and succeed and stuff like that, especially if things stall, because second half of the season, like you said, people start kind of dipping off from the peak. Bednar's great at moving puzzle pieces around and getting guys on lines that really mesh together well. Like even Drouin and Nate used to play together like a long time ago or something like that. I think
the story is McKinnon was big in him coming, right? Like he really advocated for him to come to the team. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that I'm not sure that they've been on the ice a whole lot together, but it's when they are, it seems noticeable. I mean, they pass the puck well, they give each other opportunities. It seems like a good pairing. So I mean, it seems like we have a lot of ammunition to be able to handle that slump when it does come. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. But if we can keep playing the way that we have been, then I think the answer to that question is yes. It can hold up.
It's interesting you brought up the coach there. I wanted to ask you. Bednar,
hold on. I do have there is not a coach in the NHL that looks better behind a bench than Bednar does. Like when he's got that fucking knot in that tie and it's high and tight and he's yelling at some guy with his
blazer,
massive shoulders and his fucking, like, he's standing next to NHL players and looks big, and I'm like, dude, you are a fucking unit. So
yeah,
I know you're about to get into like a whole conversation about his fucking coaching prowess, but let's just say the guy has a cup and looks like a Bond villain. So I think he gets a pass for at least 5 years.
I don't know. I'm just checking the temperature now of early in the season. It felt like there were a lot of no-shows. Bednar talked about effort. Other players talked about effort. You know, kind of was not on the hot seat, but it was getting warm. Do you think he is a good enough coach with this team now to push buttons well enough to get them to the Stanley Cup? And the other big part is goalie. How do you feel about the man in net and the Gipper? Are they going to want to win one for the Gipper enough? And our man in goal, he's been a little shaky out there, but he's had some good performances lately. Where do you stand on those two key figures? Because it feels like in playoffs, hot coach, hot goalie wins it a lot of the time.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, Bednar is definitely hot. He will be perpetually hot.
I was going to say, the guy's a smoke show. He's a bona fide 10. Like, I don't know if you could
he's
get hotter.
Getting better looking every game. You'd think the season would wear on him.
It's just not fair.
Yeah.
He needs to. God doesn't give with two hands. He needs to catch a puck in the face. Although the scar would make him dope. Honestly, the scar would make it way better. Cool. Yeah, god damn it. There's no way you could make that man unattractive. Anyways, continue, Tom.
Right, you're right. In terms of him and how he coaches, though, I mean, anytime the Avs have been in a position where they've been in a slump and everything, everyone always looks at Bednar, and the thing that they always point out is that he like shows no emotion. Like he's very even always. He's not mad. He's not super excited. There are very few times you can pick out where you can tell like he's upset with something. And people always point to that as a reason to be like, oh, well, he's not, he's not able to motivate everybody because he's just too even keel. He needs to show some emotion and stuff like that. I don't think there's ever been a legitimate reason to look at what Bednar does and be like, we need to fire this guy.
Right, now. In terms of like X's and O's. It seems like it's all like vibe coordinator. They're mad he's not prime out there.
They need to bring in Dion to the locker room. Could be good.
I can't imagine a worse idea for a hockey locker room than to bring in prime. They'd look at that guy and be like, should we beat the hell out of this guy? Or
who's talking about Canadian? His bags?
Who's Canadian Coach Prime? Who would get Canadians just amped?
I mean, I could do my best Herb Brooks impression.
I think
tonight we skate with them. Tonight we shut them down.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty. You got me.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go.
I watched that video a lot, so yeah. No, I think
So
it's probably Sakic.
Well,
just being honest, like if he wanted to do that,
I mean, he could definitely come down and
be.
But I just
unbelievable at it. I bet.
In my limited experience, right? Like I was around a relatively high level hockey program at DU, and I feel like it was interesting to watch how they operated as opposed to like the teams that I'd been a part of, or even the other teams in the department, because it is such a different thing. Like that locker room is not like any other locker room I've ever been in. Like it's just not the same, and the relationship between the coach and the players is much different. And I feel like the levels of the coaching that happen there in terms of like how much they're involved in the day to day is so different too. That and how much they're involved in like the vibes versus like, oh no, we're running this play on this face off. Like this is the line that will be out there right now. Like those are two sort of different things. And I think, it's fascinating to watch because the hockey, like community, I feel like does not understand how strange these people are. Like they are some of the weirdest motherfuckers I've ever been around, and you get 30 of them in a locker room. Like it's a wild place to be. So, it's I wish I could be a fly on the wall, honestly.
So about that goalie. You
think
he's any good?
You think he's any good? It's tough, and I know Dan's just foaming at the mouth for me.
Yeah, he's paying me to ask you these questions.
I'm sure that he is. He slid a note over to you right there that said, "Ask about Georgie." It's weird because the goaltending in the league as a whole has been weird all year. The save percentages are just down wholesale everywhere. So, I mean, Georgie being the first starting goalie of the season to get to 20 wins with an under 900 save percentage is weird. The Avs seemed to be winning in spite of his goaltending, letting in, goals that he certainly shouldn't be letting in and stuff like that. So he's in a weird spot. I think a lot of goalies are in a weird spot.
Hasn't the
right
Avs goaltending always sort of been suspect though? Like wasn't this always sort of our thing? Like outside after
our team does love to turn the puck over at the blue line. So you are going to see some, 2-on-1. That's part of the free flowing way that first line plays and attacks is sometimes they just try to do some stuff and you're like, yeah, that was bold. that was well, cool.
anytime Dan texts me and says Georgie ? That my response to him is always, it's not all his fault, especially when we're losing like 8-2 or whatever it was to Arizona or whatever.
Is there a realistic way to upgrade?
There's a lot more to it.
Like for the Avs?
Probably not within like our cap space budget. We probably don't have the money to pay a superstar goaltender to.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's sort of valued like a quarterback almost. Like when you've got a good young one, you're like, I'm not going to give up on this kid yet because maybe he's great. And so it's hard to find that like diamond in the rough, from another team that you just sort of believe in because they're not going to give up on it either.
I think that's why a lot of goalies spend so much time in the minor leagues, right? Like this is baseball. What is the
AAA and AA and ACHL and NCHL and all
the ACHL exactly, yeah. So it's part of the reason why I think goalies spend so much time down there is because they're trying to suss out whether or not they can continue developing people. Like how many times have we seen Anunin, right? Like Eustace, the guy that played last night, or was it last night? A couple nights ago. He's been around with us for several years now. and he's still not like a starter in the league and stuff like that, because I think they're continuing to try and develop him. So our depth at goalie is definitely a concern. Ever since Frankie, it sucks that Frankie didn't work out, and his injuries just kept nagging at him to the point where he couldn't play anymore. But it is a question mark, but I don't think it's to the point of like we need to get out our pitchforks and torches like Dan wants to and go to Georgie's house and let him know what we think.
You don't let Dan bully you into anything. This is the man who wants him to re-sign Russ to a 10-year contract.
I don't talk on this very often. But that is not true.
That is an interesting prospect.
That is incorrect.
I knew I could get him to chime in.
That's beautiful. Getting producer Dan on the mic. It's beautiful work.
I have a last
Ryan,
question for you, Dom. Yeah, I've got a last question for you, and maybe Kyle has something else too. But when I was looking through the standings and like my Avs watching habit is like I watch the games and I don't necessarily watch the standings as much as I would in the NBA or another league. But when I look at them, and when I was listening to the TNT guys talk the other night, they're talking about how the top of these divisions are like sort of surprise teams, right? Nobody's surprised by the Avs. Like they were sort of like up there, if not the favorite, then in the top 3 for Stanley Cup odds before the beginning of the year. And I look at that from the outside and I'm like, all right, so how are we not just going to like walk to a Stanley Cup? Like if these teams halfway through the year at the top of the divisions and the teams performing the best are like surprises, then why are we trusting them in the playoffs, So they've got to be having a lot of the same conversations and the same concerns we do. So who do you see as like the big teams that we're going to have to like get through? Obviously, we're not holding you to a prediction here, but like what do you see as the biggest hurdles for us?
It's always it feels like, at least recently, it's always been Dallas or Vegas that are the teams that are bigger. They've got a lot of veteran firepower that works well for them in the playoffs. The Avs size the past couple of years has been a topic of conversation too.
They have just seemed to get bullied. Like
They definitely have. This year, I mean, Nate anymore is a bulldog, man. That guy.
I was gonna say he truck sticked somebody the other
night.
week, and it was a
that clip of him where he's just like skating around him, going like, "Whoa!"
Well, I mean, when you get him downhill, I wouldn't want to be standing in front of him. Like he's not a small guy.
No, that's the thing. No. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, Dallas and Vegas, they tend to be problems just because of their size and the number of veterans that they have that have been through the circus a couple of times. So, those are who I would be concerned about. I mean,
anybody out east?
When
Boston's big.
We had a good game against Boston. That was fun.
I also won a lot of money on that one. That was great. Yeah,
that was a great game. So Boston will definitely be interesting. I'm trying to think of anything. I wanted to say Florida, but maybe not. Tampa Bay, maybe, but maybe. I mean,
yeah.
The big ones are in our division. Yeah. I think we can play pretty well with most of the teams out east.
I also, to make a cross sport comparison, to me it feels like the first time NFC teams see Lamar Jackson, they're always like, "Holy hell, that guy's fast!" And like the AFC teams are just like, "Yeah, we've seen how fast he is all the time. We're basically always trying to cheat to stop that." So like Dallas and them, they've learned how to cheat a little bit. Whereas it feels like out east, if you're playing us and you haven't played against our speed on a consistent level, you might get jumped on in a Stanley Cup series, very similar to what we saw when the Avs did win the Cup, where it was like, oh, you weren't ready for this level of movement out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the prime example of that is last year when we lost in the playoffs to Seattle, right? Like it was brutal because Seattle figured out exactly what you needed to do to stop the rush, um, and contain McKinnon essentially. But now, I mean, I don't know what they're doing differently, or if there's more pieces of the puzzle that were missing from last year that we gained this year that it's maybe not as effective. Because I mean that's a blueprint
Right.
for how you should be able to stop the Avs, because Seattle did it so well. So, I mean, teams are obviously looking at that and trying to do that same thing this year, and for whatever reason, it seems to be not working. So, yeah, I don't know what it is, but we've maybe found a groove that we can slide in.
Last question for me here. So maybe there's some Broncos fans. They're coming out of their Broncos sadness. They're like, all right, I'm going to hop into this Avs season here.
Stay in your Broncos sadness. You deserve it. Stay in it.
I don't agree with that statement, nor do I.
We all live here. We all live here.
Yeah.
All right, let's just.
And they asked you. They said, "Hey, who do we hate the most? And what's a team that we're playing somewhat soon that you would be like, you should watch that game? Like, that's going to be a good game. The Avs are going to get going in that one. They're going to try to come at us. We're going to try to come at them. It's going to be great."
I mean, the team that we hate the most, it's always a toss-up between like the Preds and the Blues.
Why do we hate the Preds?
Everybody hates.
It feels like we always mess them up.
I think it's their fans.
A little.
I think it's
little
their
mouthy
fans
down there.
And
we're not talking about the amount of teeth in your mouth. All right, there's many a gap.
Kyle's
right.
letting the wife talk right now. He can't talk too bad about the Preds. He can't
I'll
have
say
this
what I want
slander
about
on the
the Preds.
podcast.
I went to a game there and it was miserable. The worst sporting event of my life.
That's what I'm saying. And then
He was in a box
those
too,
fans
so
come
that's
to-
really saying something.
It was awful.
Oh my goodness! I mean, how nice really is a box in Tennessee? though?
What Ryan
There's probably
means
just,
is,
a couple of craft singers there for you.
well, I mean that's for 18 people, honestly.
You got to quarter those things out.
Did no alcohol, just Mountain Dews. Code Red. I don't know why. It was an odd thing. So I mean,
But it's Bennington.
it feels like we always mess them up. And then, yes, St. Louis, I totally understand. Old school me, I still hate the Stars a lot because they used to beat the Avs back in the day.
We talked about the Wild.
The Wild haven't been good enough for us to be mad at.
That's
They're
true.
like the Raiders
Yeah, fair enough.
back in the day.
The games will always be fun to watch against the Wild because, I mean, there is a rivalry there for sure, but the Wild haven't been good
They're
enough.
trying
for
the
it to be
best
like a
their
good
little
rivalry.
Minnesota selves can do.
They sure can't. They sure.
All right, so we're playing. Hold on, let's give some people some gambling advice. We're playing the Bruins on the road tomorrow. What do we think? We're not going to be able to actually win this game, right? But let's make somebody on some player props.
You don't think we're going to be able to win this game?
Well, you tell me. I guess that was me saying that. I don't.
I don't know, man. I think I can't remember if we won the game that we played against Boston. You might know since you've made a good bet, Ryan.
We won at home.
Okay. That game was just so good. Regardless, it's going to be a good game. I bet you bet the over.
Yeah.
That's and unless the over is like 7.5 already. If it's like 6.5, you're probably in pretty good shape.
Yeah, let's see. I'm pulling up the odds right now. It's 6.
I would take
Yeah.
that.
It's
100%.
juiced a little bit to the over, but that's interesting. The Avs are plus 120 on the money line, so that's another interesting little thing. So the tastiest shit to me, Dom, always, as when I'm looking at this as a square, is I just look at Cale Makar's goal scoring odds, and I'm like, it's over plus 200 every time. I'm like, why? How do I not just take this? Talk me out of it.
I wonder what if you were just to bet a Kale goal like every
you gotta end up positive.
Game, like what
you'd have to.
I mean, instead of betting a goal, bet his points.
Yeah,
because I mean he's one of the leading. I think he is the leading defensive point scorer.
It's crazy, now. And McKinnon just took over the points lead or tied for the points lead as well. So
it's that battle between him and Kucherov has been just ridiculous because like every time you see Nate pull ahead, Kucherov will have like a 4-point game. Yeah. It's ridiculous. He's on another level.
You are telling me that we have waited until the 35th minute to inform me that our best player is rivals with a man we could be calling Cooch?
I saw the look on your face, and I was like, I don't know what Kyle's about to say, but we might have to cut this. And I'm so happy that we don't have to.
I'm just saying.
You're really, everybody's getting a peek behind the curtain because the nervousness in my heart is.
Started having
did you see McKinnon go right by him? His Cooch was showing.
That's great. Well, I think I've learned a lot.
Who does the Cooch play for?
Tampa
Bay. Yeah, I'm in. I'm hating on him every game.
I hate watching them play too. I would love.
I'm not going to watch a minute of that hockey. I'm just going to see and then get on their Twitters and just start. Mostly garbage time. Not like Nate scoring when it counts. Hashtag the Cooch.
The worst.
All right. So let's leave on this note. Are the Avs right now, you just have to say, are the Avs winning the Stanley Cup?
You go first. Kyle,
yes,
you go first.
I'm a mindless homer. I thought the Broncos would win 11 games. You think I'm not going to take a team that's actually good to win the championship? Wait till we do our Rockies preview. I'm going to be like, I think we got a wild card chance. Go with me on this, boys.
I'm going yes too. I've always been. I think actually
playoff hockey is so much fun.
The Avs are probably my favorite homer team, where I just get to like sort of blindly root for them, and I don't know enough about the sport to like really have an informed opinion, so I just get to cheer for the guys, and I will absolutely go in on this. So yeah.
100%. I mean, we're in
Let's go,
one of the best hockey windows that we've ever gotten to be in. So just keep saying yes. We're definitely contenders.
Just keep saying yes. That's good. That's good for life. I don't like that you just ended that with contenders, though. Can we get a firm? We are going to win. We'd like to cut this for the social media dump. The Avs are going to win. Say your full name and hold up a newspaper dated today.
Yeah, the Avs are going to win this.
Let's go.
Let's
go. All right,
man,
that's
I
exciting.
Can't wait
to hear.
To be watching that.
Man, I'm excited for two parades. Two parades.
Jokic won't have to leave the
parade. Joint parades. Oh. Wonderful idea.
Jokic will just stay out there and then hop on a fire truck with the Avs. Make it happen. It'll be a beautiful thing.
I'm so excited.
Me too.
Make sure they invite Russ. I feel like he needs a pick me up.
Yeah. I don't know how many invites Russ is going to be getting in the Denver area.
Well, he sent out a lot for his birthday party, and I don't think a lot of people went. So
I didn't get my invitation. I would have gone.
Hey, Russ, if you listen to this, I would have gone.
I would have peed in both of his sinks.
Christened his
sinks. Pee in both sinks. That means one of those sinks is for his 12 children. All right. You can't be sullying their sink.
If I wash it out, well, I can.
Yeah, all right.
You guys follow the social media guy that tracks how many touchdowns
Yeah.
Russ passes compared to how many bathrooms he has in his house, right? He's got more than 2 bathroom sinks,
I
right?
know. I always confuse it, honestly. I've never gotten it correct. I'm either wrong about which side. Whatever side I'm making the metaphor about, I'm always wrong. So it's on brand.
Happens to the best of us. Well, Dom, thank you for joining us on this, and we will check in with you before the playoffs again. And once we know our matchups and all that, we'll bring on round by round as we march to the Stanley Cup, so we can be happy about hockey together.
Sounds great.
I think we need to.
appreciate
I think we need to have like a 10-minute Dom update every couple of weeks. You know, just like a Dom. How do you feel about the Avs? I don't feel very good. Georgie sucks. And then check in a week and a half later. I think that's a great cadence.
We can do a hard cut to me just being like, feel good.
Yeah. I'm fine. You're fine. Everybody's fine. Yeah.
I like that.
That sounds good. I'm in.
I like it. All right. Well, stay tuned for part 2, where we will be diving into the divisional playoffs.
Blucifer Brothers is a Crab Shell Media podcast.